Great Neck, Long Island, a deranged gunman, Andrew Brooks, goes on a spree.
We had an individual here who had 5 people, and he had been firing at the police officers randomly throughout the day.
This case doesn't start with a standoff. It doesn't even start with a hostage situation. At first, police thought they were dealing with a single shooting. Then they found a missing person. Then more bodies. By the time they understood what was actually happening, the man responsible had already moved on to a second location. It ended in a hostage situation so surreal that police were forced to deploy one of the earliest tactical robots ever used in a civilian standoff. Most people have never heard of it, but the damage it left behind was permanent. Andrew Brooks Jr. was 47 years old and lived with his elderly parents in the Little Neck section of Queens, New York. He wasn't known for violence or crime. He was known for being unsettling. Neighbors later described him as withdrawn, erratic, and difficult to interact with. Some avoided him entirely, others dismissed him as harmless, strange, but not dangerous. There was no criminal record, no documented history of violence, no clear warning signs that suggested what was coming. For years, he lived quietly with his parents, Andrew Brooks Sr. and Marion, both in their mid-70s. That arrangement had gone on without incident until it didn't. Before dawn on October 13, 1991, residents of Little Neck were jolted awake by gunfire. This wasn't a neighborhood where that kind of sound blended into the background. Calls to police came in almost immediately. When officers arrived at the Brooks family home, they had no idea they were stepping into the aftermath of violence that had likely unfolded over several days. The house wasn't the scene of a single outburst. It was the endpoint of something much longer. Behind the home, inside a backyard tool shed, officers found 2 bodies. One was Andrew Brooks Sr., the other was Brian Ducker, a neighbor who had been reported missing days earlier. Inside the house, the situation escalated. 2 young men, 23-year-old Daniel Gintnick and Michael Zarabi, were found dead in different areas of the home, both killed with the same rifle. Later, police located Brooks's mother Marion, also deceased. 5 people were dead at the residence. 2 others had survived, but just barely. Both had been shot and were rushed to nearby hospitals in critical condition. They would live, but with injuries that would permanently alter their lives. By the time police finished documenting the scene, the scope was undeniable. 7 victims total, 5 dead, 2 critically injured, and Andrew Brooks Jr. was gone. As investigators tried to understand what had happened in Little Neck, emergency calls began coming in from another community, Great Neck, just across the county line. Brooks had fled. At some point, he forced his way into a random home and took 2 people hostage, a retired psychiatrist named Paul Gregory and his wife Eva. Inside their own house, they were suddenly prisoners. Brooks positioned himself upstairs with a rifle and began firing sporadically, toward police, toward nearby homes, and occasionally toward the street below. At one point, a gardener arrived to work at a nearby property. Brooks fired in his direction, forcing the man to flee for his life. Police quickly established a perimeter. The standoff had begun. Police negotiators managed to reach Brooks by telephone. Early on, he was coherent. He responded. He listened. Eventually, negotiators convinced him to release Paul Gregory. Eva Gregory remained inside. For hours, Brooks continued pacing near the upstairs window, rifle in hand. Officers waited, watching for movement, listening for changes in his behavior. Then, late in the afternoon, after nearly 13 hours in captivity, Eva Gregory saw her chance. While Brooks was distracted, she ran. Footage captures her sprinting away as officers rushed forward to protect her. Police later stated that Brooks could have shot her. He didn't. Why remains unclear. With both hostages safe, police held their positions through the night. Attempts to communicate became less productive. Brooks' speech grew disorganized. His responses were erratic. Eventually, police escalated. They deployed an armored early-generation police robot equipped with a camera and speaker, technology that was still unusual in civilian law enforcement at the time. The robot entered the house slowly. Officers spoke to Brooks through it, telling him to come to the top of the stairs, assuring him the robot wasn't a threat. The response was gunfire.
Andy, I can stop the robot anytime. Just come to the top of the stairs. The robot's not gonna hurt you. Okay? We're controlling the robot. I can hear you. Okay?
Brooks shot the robot multiple times. When that didn't stop it, he finally disabled it by shooting its power cord. It's one of the strangest moments in the case, a man barricaded in a suburban home firing at a machine sent in to reason with him. With negotiations stalled and the robot destroyed, police made the decision to enter the home. Inside, they found Andrew Brooks Jr. dead in an upstairs bedroom. He had taken his own life. At 1:10 p.m. the following afternoon, roughly 35 hours after the violence began, police officially declared the standoff over. The final toll was devastating. 6 people dead, including Brooks himself. 2 victims left with life-threatening injuries. 2 elderly hostages traumatized in their own home. Investigators were left with no clear motive. Brooks had no criminal history, no documented mental illness, no known conflicts that explained the violence. Later reports suggested he believed he was dying from a rare blood cancer, a belief that may have contributed to his actions. But beyond that, there were no answers, no manifesto, no explanation, no warning that anyone recognized in time, only the aftermath, and 2 communities permanently altered by someone most people had dismissed as simply strange. At first glance, this looked like a tragic accident. A family SUV drove off a cliff in Northern California, plunging more than 100 feet into the Pacific Ocean. There were no skid marks, no attempt to slow down, just a straight path forward, and then nothing. 8 people were inside. None survived. What investigators would eventually uncover made the case far more disturbing than it first appeared. The vehicle belonged to the Hart family, 2 mothers, Jennifer and Sarah Hart, and their 6 adopted children. Online, the family was widely known. Their social media accounts were filled with smiling photos, road trips, and long posts about love, equality, and progressive parenting. They were often praised for adopting African American children and speaking openly about inclusivity and compassion. To the outside world, they looked like the perfect family. Behind the scenes, the reality was very different. Years before the crash, multiple red flags had already been raised. Neighbors reported seeing the children asking for food. Teachers noticed bruises and signs of neglect. Child Protective Services had opened investigations, more than once. But each time, the family moved. Different state, different school district, different authorities. The system never fully connected the dots. On March 26, 2018, the Hart family was traveling along Highway 1 near Mendocino County. Their SUV suddenly veered off the road and went straight over the edge of a cliff. At first, it was treated as a possible accident. That theory didn't last long. Investigators found no evidence of braking. Toxicology reports later showed that Jennifer Hart had alcohol in her system. Witnesses reported erratic driving earlier that day. Then came the autopsy results. Several of the showed signs of long-term abuse and malnutrition. This wasn't a crash, it was intentional. Authorities concluded that Jennifer Hart deliberately drove the family off the cliff, killing herself, her wife, and all 6. A murder-suicide disguised as a family tragedy. In the aftermath, attention turned to everything that had been missed. Why were repeated abuse reports never escalated? Why were warning signs dismissed? Why did a carefully curated online image outweigh the reality experienced by the children themselves? The Hart family crash isn't just disturbing because of how it ended. It's disturbing because of how long it was allowed to continue. A public image of love and activism concealed years of neglect, control, and suffering, until the only escape the children were given was death. Most people remember the cliff. Few remember the warning signs. At first, this was treated as a routine industrial accident, a brief malfunction, a technical failure, something that went wrong too quickly to stop. But what happened aboard the Byford Dolphin oil rig in 1983 would later be described as one of the most violent workplace accidents ever recorded. Not because of fire or impact, but because of pressure. And it happened in less than a second. The Byford Dolphin was a semi-submersible oil rig operating in the North Sea. On November 5, 1983, a team of saturation divers was working inside a pressurized chamber system nearly 300 feet below the surface. Saturation diving is already extreme. Divers live for days or weeks inside pressurized environments, breathing gas mixtures designed to keep them alive. At depths the human body was never meant to endure. Every movement in and out of these chambers has to be controlled precisely. That morning, something wasn't. During a routine transfer between chambers, a clamp separating a high-pressure chamber from a lower-pressure area was opened prematurely. There was no warning, no gradual failure. The pressure difference was catastrophic. In a fraction of a second, the chamber explosively decompressed. 4 men were inside. The pressure dropped so fast that their bodies couldn't respond. One diver was killed instantly, his body forced through an opening barely large enough for a human head. Others suffered injuries so severe that official reports struggled to describe them without technical language. There was no pain in the traditional sense, no time to react, no chance of survival. It was over almost immediately. What made the incident even more disturbing was how little of it was visible from the outside. No explosion in the traditional sense, no fire, no collapse, just silence, and the realization that the pressure system had failed in the worst way possible. Investigators later determined that safety procedures had been bypassed. Interlocks that should have prevented the clamp from opening weren't in place. Human error combined with design flaws created a situation where a single action could be fatal, and it was. The Byford Dolphin incident didn't just kill workers, it exposed how fragile safety really was in deep-sea operations at the time. Following the accident, saturation diving protocols were rewritten, pressure systems were redesigned, safety interlocks became mandatory. These changes came too late for the men who died. Today, the case is rarely discussed outside of engineering or diving communities. There's no footage widely circulated, no dramatic final moments, just diagrams, reports, and the uncomfortable knowledge of what extreme pressure can do to the human body when something goes wrong. The Byford Dolphin incident is disturbing not because it was malicious, but because it was routine. A normal day, a standard procedure, one mistake, and an outcome so sudden and violent that it still stands as a warning decades later.